Chapter 13, Confidants and Soul Healers. William walked around the office as if he scrutinized each corner of the room as if it were the first time he visited that place and wanted to memorize every detail, even though he had been many times in that room in the not-too-distant past. He stopped in front of the shelves full of books and watched carefully, though he doubted that many new books had been added since he was last there. Anything to avoid seeing the man sitting behind the desk. At that moment the man concentrated all his attention on a bottle he had in his hands. He was an old man, who looked to be just over 80, with a good physical appearance for his age, that of a man who had been handsome in his youth, and dressed elegantly, but with some comfort or informality. After a couple of minutes, he placed the bottle on the desk and raised his head as he took off his glasses, directing his gaze to William. "So a Pingus 2004, of the
Denominación de origen Ribera del Duero.
An excellent Spanish wine, right?" the man said, speaking like an old professor, somewhat severe. "Yes, it is," William answered serenely. "Can I ask the price?" "Anyway, I'll look for it on the internet, but I'd like to hear it now," replied the man, leaning back in his chair. "Of course, it cost €2,350, that is, a little more than £2,050 and a little less than $2,700, answered William kindly. "It must be very good for that price, in addition to the excellent wine expert who bought it, good compensation for that vase you broke in your last visit here," the man replied with sarcasm and a mocking smile. "You forget that I already paid that vase and I offered my apologies for the incident. This is a gift, a peace offering if you prefer to see it like this," said William with a smile between mocking and embarrassed. "Sit down, William, since you're here let's start," said the man. William sat in an armchair while the man, William's psychiatrist, got up from behind the desk and sat in another armchair in front of William. "Where should I start, Arthur?" William asked. "For the reason to return to here after your stormy farewell, I think it would be a good idea," replied Arthur, kind and a little joker. William related the way he met Victoria, his marriage proposal to her and how she accepted it. "Then, if I have understood well, you marry that girl for revenge, or not?" Arthur said calmly, but with an intensely scrutinizing look. "I would not say it was exactly a revenge at first. Maybe I wanted to think that it was like that I wanted to get revenge on Caroline, and that's why I disguised it as revenge, but now I think that's not the case, that is, I'm not sure. I think I needed a reason to live, I needed a reason to cling to, something that would give some meaning to my life beyond just surviving sunk in depression, remembering every minute the absence of my son. Obviously, the reason was absurd, crazy, but for a mind deranged by despair and pain, any small thing to cling to, however deranged, seems a blessed way out," answered William. "And the girl? Did you think of the girl as something more than an object to give meaning to your life and consolation to your despair?" Arthur asked. "I must confess that at first, I did not," William answered after a sigh, reflecting a certain shame in the gesture of his face and while playing with his hands nervously. "I was too, I do not know how to say it, euphoric? The fact is that at the beginning I only acted with enthusiasm for having found something to use all my energy, a goal to pursue hard, and thinking of satisfying my hatred and get the pleasure to see the face of Caroline to tell her. Then I thought about it calmly and looked for ways to rationalize it. I thought that, after all, I was not hurting her, that I was not forcing her to do anything that she did not want. I gave her guarantees that our marriage would be just what she wanted, that if she did not want to have sex with me never, even if we were married for several years, I would accept it, which, in any case, would be an excellent business for her. I thought, perhaps with some cynicism, that a girl with a life as hard and tragic as hers, with the bad fortune that persecutes her and her family, the fact that I had chosen her to solve all her problems, well, which was an almost heroic act on my part, that she should thank as if I were her savior, fallen from heaven." When saying this, William smiled with irony and sadness. "Without me, her life would be a tragic disaster," I thought. "Well, we all look for ways to justify our actions and we want to think that in the end, they are good, in one way or another. I have hardly found someone in my practice who is willing to admit that their actions are perverse and that they were not justified, said Arthur leaning back in his armchair, but that was your way of seeing things, and feeling at first. Now, what do you feel? He asked. Our relationship has changed a lot, I cannot deny it. I have changed about it, William replied cautiously. Then William told Arthur about the latest events in his relationship with Victoria, including his dinner with her and the kiss with which it ended. Well, obviously the situation has evolved. So, what do you feel for her now? Arthur asked, urging him to speak. Well, I feel desire for her, obviously, she is a young and beautiful girl, so she naturally awakens my desire. On the other hand, I feel genuine admiration for her, I admire her courage and her nobility. I have learned to feel affection for her, and perhaps, maybe some compassion for her situation, answered William honestly. Compassion or emotional empathy? Arthur asked with a scrutinizing look. Is not the same. William replied. No, can be felt compassion for a stranger and even in some cases for an enemy. You can be felt only the genuine emotional empathy for someone you really care about, someone for whom you feel love, some kind of love, said Arthur. In that case, I do not know what to answer you, I only know that I care about her well-being and that I do not want to see her suffer, and that I certainly empathize with her pain, William replied. My experience tells me that when a man feels sexual desire for a woman, and also feels admiration for her, cares about her welfare and empathizes emotionally with her, those cases inevitably ends with the man falling in love with the woman, said Arthur in a reflexive way. Your experience as a psychiatrist? William replied. As a man, Arthur replied with a smile. I cannot fall in love with her, to love sincerely have to trust, and I do not think I'll trust a woman again, said William with a sad smile. I'm not so sure about that. Surely you did not think that a woman who was not from your closest family, again you would care, to the point of empathizing with her pain and you worrying about her well-being. But, in any case, that girl is falling in love of you, and after her painful past, it's not easy for her either. Do not you fear hurting her? Especially after how she opened her heart in front of you at that dinner, after she confessed the most painful and shameful experiences of her life, and showed you all her emotional fragility. Do not you fear to cause more pain to a girl has known too much suffering in her short life? Arthur said in a soft voice but full of authority and seriousness. William recalled the compassion he felt at dinner when Victoria made her painful confession, a confession about events in her life that he already knew from the investigation he had commissioned from his private investigators, but that seemed more terrible to see the immense damage emotional that they had caused in Victoria. Sincerely, Arthur, I'm terrified. I'm terrified because I'm afraid of hurting her, and now I'm quite confused, said William with some anguish. On another side of town, Victoria was also in her own psychiatrist's office. The two women had been talking for a long time. Then, Victoria, this emotional striptease that you did at dinner, that sincere confession of your emotions and your past, really is something very significant. Until recently you were absolutely reluctant to share your emotions with people, especially men. If you have opened in this way, it is because William has managed to get you emotionally involved with him. On the other hand, you also rejected the idea of intimacy sexual with a man. Now you were willing to have it with William. What do you feel about it? Asked Dr. Emma, a middle-aged, thin woman with a friendly face. I feel many contradictory emotions. I feel relieved to be able to speak about my past with sincerity because it is something liberating. I feel enthusiasm, joy, hope, but at the same time, I feel fear, distrust, doubts. Really, William produces so many emotions in me, so many mixed feelings, which is like an emotional roller coaster. I only know that he has become in a short time someone important in my life, I cannot deny it, said Victoria, between anxious and relieved to talk about it with the psychiatrist. Victoria, I've been your psychiatrist since that terrible experience. We have a lot of time working together, in your therapy. I've seen you make great progress. I've seen you overcome with courage the deep emotional wounds and to face challenges too hard for a person with much older and life experience than you, and not bow down in front adversity. However, as is natural, you are still far from having an emotionally satisfying life, to be happy with your life, and that is not only due to external factors such as your mother's illness but also to the consequences left those traumatic events that you lived that have affected you, sequels that for example did not allow you to think about having a sentimental and/or sexual life like any woman of your age. I am glad that you are now taking that step, but as I told you, this situation with that man, it is potentially risky. Evidently the way in which that man has entered your life, in which he has pressured you to marry him and how he has handled things, it is not exactly normal, and although I cannot judge him, knowing his past and his current actions, I can suppose that he also has wounds and emotional problems. That's why you should be cautious with your emotions, said Dr. Emma. Are you going to tell me that I should get away from him? Victoria asked with sadly disguised sadness. No, part of a person's happiness and emotional stability is making their own decisions, and that's part of your healing process, as I've told you before. In addition, Victoria, in life all people must meet different types of people and situations, some very complex and strange, and our emotional maturity and our survival depend on how we face those people and those situations. I think this is another test that you have to face and overcome. After all, getting emotionally involved or falling in love with someone involves exposure to the danger of being hurt, and that is why we must enter into a relationship with courage and caution, courage to live the experience and enjoy it without fear, and caution to protect your heart and not to let a sentimental failure destroy you. I think you should live the experience, Victoria, and no one should tell you what you should do about it. How do you see it? Emma said. I think what you say makes sense, and largely coincides with what I think and feel. In fact, I wrote in my diary some lines that express in other words something similar to what you told me. I do not think William is a bad person, I do not think he is a dangerous madman either, but I think he is deeply disturbed by his tragedy. But that's something I could also say about myself, although I'm afraid that William reminds me more of my father in his last days. I do not know if I'll ever love William totally, I do not know if I'll ever do it with any man, but I know that what I feel for him is already strong enough to open my heart in that emotional striptease and be willing to give my body, to break the taboo that I imposed on myself because of the trauma I suffered. I feel desire for him, I confess, only with you I dare to admit it. I wish to have physical intimacy with him, Victoria said blushing, and I also want to discover what he keeps in his heart, even if it is a darkness as big as the one my father suffered. I want to know him, I want to know if I can love him and if he can love me. I like the feeling of being protected by him, and I would like to believe that I can get to know what happiness is again, but I also know that I must protect my heart, and as you say, I must prepare myself mentally for an eventual failure. I must learn to avoid being hurt like they once did. I think it's a challenge that I have to face, to have a relationship and know that it can end badly, and in that case, I have to survive and to move on, and that the life does not end with a failure. Thanks to you, Doctor, I think I have the necessary tools to do it. Here, Victoria added with a smile between sweet and sad while pointing with the index finger of a hand to her. I hope so, Victoria. I have faith in you, you are a survivor, said Dr. Emma with an affectionate smile. In different places of the city, both psychiatric consultations came to an end, with different moods.
I didn't know what it meant to be alone. I didn't know till the day you were gone that I could ever feel this miserable without you here.